Hello, I think I'm going live. Yes, I'm live. Hi guys. TeaFairy story time is about to begin. Um, Woo, there's people already on. Hi guys. My screen is set up so that my picture is down here, and when I look at myself, I'm down here. But I'm also videotaping up here on YouTube, so I'm going to try to focus up here and not down here. Today's story is Sophie the Robot with a Soul. Sorry, Sophie the Robot with a Soul, and it's by Irina Dumitru. The lighting is making it very hard to see. I think that works. I don't know. There we go. Nope. There we go. Well, you can see it on one camera and not the other, and on one of them it's backwards. I'm not sure. I think it's the Facebook one. And I've actually watched a video yesterday where there was another storyteller that was trying to do this on Facebook, and it comes out backwards on Facebook, and I don't understand why. So I apologize if it's backwards. It's not me, it's the technology. I can only do so much. You will see that my setting is different this week than it normally is. I do not have my big Afghan quilt behind me the same way. It's still here in my chair. I actually make these, and I've got all of my supplies over here next to me. My yarn and one that I'm working on. You can see it. Ta-da! I make them out of squares. I sew together, I make a square out of yarn with a hook. Let me see if I can find my hook. My hook. You see my hook? See how it's a little hooky thing at the end here? And I take the yarn, let's find a nice vibrant color. Ooh, purple! And I use the hook to make loops and knots in the yarn, like this, around the hook. And then I pull the yarn through the hoop, through the knots over and over again. And then I make a circle like this. Whoops. There you go. I should probably do one of these videos just on how to make a granny square. It's not that hard. But then you can see that there's a little circle here. See it? And then I just keep going in and out of the circle until it makes a center circle like this. And then I work my way out from there in circles after circles after circles. But it actually is squares, squares, after squares, after squares, after squares, until it gets to be 9 whole rows. And if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, this is not big enough, but normally I make a square of 9 rows. And then I sew 2 squares together so that they're like this, back to back. And then when you open them up, they're attached to each other. And then you just keep doing that until you have an Afghan. It's super fun. It's kind of easy. It's not very hard. If I can do it, you can do it. I guarantee it. And you can actually go to YouTube, and they've got all kinds of tutorials on how to make a whole bunch of different kinds of squares. Some of them have flowers in the middle, and some of them look like seashells, and it's kind of cool. You guys should try it. Enough about my silly crocheting stuff. I just thought it would be a good intro while I'm waiting for people to still come so that we can start our story time. This morning, I read the first chapter of Sophia, the Robot with a Soul, by Irina Dumitru. And I read it on my podcast that I started. And for the past couple of weeks, I've been reading Beatrix Potter stories. And I finished those up yesterday. So we will be reading this entire book at the podcast. Whereas right now, I'm only going to read you chapter 1 because I'm going to be showing you a little bit of the illustrations that are in here. It's a long book and I can't see reading the whole thing in one sitting. So what I'm doing on the podcast is I'm reading it one chapter at a time. Each podcast, what do you call it? Each podcast episode, that's the word, episode, is one chapter. Oh, my hair, my crown. You like my crown? My antennas? Each episode will be one chapter, and there are 14 chapters, so there will be 14 episodes of Sophia until we complete it, and I get to share it with all of you, and I'm really excited. It's a cute story about a little robot girl, and she will be your best friend by the end of the book. I think you will all, young and old, fall in love with Miss Sophia. Irina is a 35-year-old. Here, let me see if I can find the information. I entered it on the event here, but I don't have it memorized. So I will start by reading what I wrote. Welcome to TeaFairy Storytime. Today I am sharing the first chapter of a wonderful book by author Irina Dumitru titled Sophia the Robot with a Soul. The illustrations inside the book were created by her and her 10-year-old son, Mihai. The cover art is produced by Adriana Mihaela and Andra Gheorghe. Sophia is the best friend any child would want to have. She always offers unconditional love and support when needed. Things are not always what they seem. What if your best friend were a robot? Would you ask her to do your homework? Would you suddenly treat her differently? Find out as you follow Sophie, a robot built in a secret lab hidden underneath the nameless island, as she goes on an adventure to find out what she was built to do, but also what she is meant to do, to be, and how she can function with friends by her side. Adventure, fun, and emotion are the special ingredients in Sophie, the Robot with a Soul, a book written for children, and yet adults can't stop reading it until the very last page. Now, before I go on and read more, I want to let you guys know that I recognize sometimes I make mistakes when I'm reading. And it's really important that I point out why I don't go back and just edit out those mistakes. Because I could go back in here and I could undo some of the mistakes I just made when I was reading. But the reality is that I'm human. Well, I'm a fairy, but I'm human. And we're all humans and we all make mistakes. And especially people that are just learning to read, we make lots of mistakes when we're learning to read or when we're learning something new, like crocheting. I sometimes make mistakes when I'm crocheting, and I've been crocheting for 28 years. And I've been reading for even longer, and we still all make mistakes. But rather than going back and editing it and like making a big deal about the mistake or giving up and saying, I can't do it. That wasn't very nice. We don't throw books, but you get the point. Instead of saying, I give up, we just keep moving. We can correct the mistake a little bit, or we can acknowledge that we made the mistake, or sometimes it's best just to keep moving and not focus on the mistake. Anyways, I leave my mistakes in these videos on purpose because I want people to understand that it's okay to make mistakes and that we're all learning. And when you learn, making mistakes is part of the learning process. And so I leave them in. I also want to tell a very short tale before I get started. I was told one time of this tale of these Native American women that were making baskets. And somebody was observing them while they were making the baskets. In fact, it was a lot like crocheting. It's a form of macrame or braiding of some sort. And this one woman made a mistake. And the person who was observing said, oh, you made a mistake. And she said, yes, I know I made a mistake, but I leave the mistakes alone and I keep going from there rather than undoing it and fixing it. I just leave the mistake in and I keep making the basket. And he said, well, why do you do that? And she said, well, only the creator, the great maker of all things is perfect. And we are just human, and we're not supposed to be perfect. And even that little mistake in the basket is beautiful in its own way and shows how beautiful the piece is, even with the little mistake. And we as individuals and as beings, be you fairy or human, none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, and it makes us more beautiful that way because it makes us unique and individual, and that's important. So, with that being said, if I make mistakes when I'm reading, I may sometimes acknowledge them and correct myself, or I may just keep going. But it's okay. We all make mistakes. All right. So it is 2:27, and it is time to prepare to read the story, because originally, here's another mistake I made. Originally, I had made this event for 2 o'clock, but something else collided with it, and so I had to put it off a little bit. And I said, okay, well, I'll start it at 2:30. But then I was able to start a little bit earlier. So I figured I would start. I would talk to you guys for a little bit and let you get to know Miss TeaFairy here before we get started on the book. And can you hear my chair? It makes crazy noises. So I apologize if you hear all the squeaking. Okay. Irina Dumitru, Sophie the Robot with a Soul. And Irina, if you're watching, thank you so much for sending me this lovely book. I'm super excited to share it with everybody, and I know that everybody's going to love it as much as I do. So, there's not a whole lot of pictures, and as they pop up, I will show them to you. So mostly you're going to be looking at me and Sophie here. And this book was translated from Romanian into English. And the editor is my friend and author, Victoria Hyla Maldonado. And I don't know if you remember her book that I read, but it was Bartleby the Brave. And it was a fun book. And I don't have it on me right now. I wish I did. I would show it to you guys. But you can go back on my YouTube channel or back through Facebook. And there is a Bartleby the Brave video that you can watch of that story. All right, Irina Dumitru, Sophie the Robot with a Soul. This book is inspired by recent technological events. Sophie is a humanoid robot capable of independent thought. This, however, is only a premise for my story and has various moral implications. Each and every child in the world has the right to dream. Sophie the Robot with a Soul is the shortcut to a dream world where disabled children have the chance to walk. Here, wrongdoers receive a second chance, and only those who don't regret their deeds are punished. Here, friendship overcomes physical differences, as well as other social barriers. Someone once asked me if Sophie will turn into a little girl like Pinocchio turned into a little boy, a real little boy. I told her that Sophie already was a little girl. She can feel and think and offer a message of acceptance to children all over the world, but especially to adults. She doesn't judge, reject, or understand evil, but instead seeks logical explanations for others' actions. Sophie is the best friend any child would want to have. She always offers unconditional love and support when needed. Chapter 1. A Robot is Born. You both see that? There we go. And when I say both, YouTube and Facebook. YouTube and Facebook. I got 2 cameras going at the same time. 2 at the same time. A robot is born. It was a wonderful day outside. The sun was shining so brightly it was hard to look at the sky. But not a beam of natural light penetrated Dr. Schwartz's secret lab, hidden almost 30 feet deep within the earth on Nameless Island. Everyone was bustling around like ants in the underground bunker that stretched beneath the entire surface of the island. It was a very important day, the most important of all. Today, they would wake her up, long planned and awaited. This was Dr. Eric Schwartz's lifelong dream. A doctor was just a small part of what he was, really. He was a physician, an engineer, a geneticist, a programmer, and an expert in robotics. And here you can see the illustration done by Dumitru's son, and his name again, gosh, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. His name is Mihai, M-I-H-A-I, Mihai. And he was only 10 years old when he did this illustration. So this just goes to show you, children. I don't know if you can see it on the other channel. There we go. This is for the YouTube, and this is for the Facebook. Make sure that everybody can see it. This just goes to show you, kids, that you don't have to be adults to write a book or to illustrate a book. I actually was just talking with a mom today whose 12-year-old is writing a book. And I'm excited and hopeful that she'll send me a copy of it so I can share it with you guys. Anyway, back to Sophie. Quite short for a man with his thick lensed glasses, ruffled black hair, and crumpled white lab coat, the doctor was a sad sight to behold. I think this is the doctor down here. Looking like the result of a child's failed chemistry experiment. Appearances, however, can be deceiving. He was the magician, the genius who had managed to create the first humanoid robot with advanced artificial intelligence, Sophie. Good morning, Sophie. It's time to wake up. Good morning, said the little girl lying on the workbench. Only she wasn't a normal little girl with blonde hair arranged in 2 side braids and a pale face animated by a pair of piercing green eyes. The humanoid robot Sophie was awaiting her creator. She wore a red knee-length princess dress. You see her cute little princess dress? That made her look like a china doll. Upon hearing Dr. Schwartz's voice, Sophie gently opened her eyes, looking around puzzled, and said, "My system tells me I'm a robot, the most advanced robot ever built." "Yes, you're a special robot because you are so very human. You can express what you feel and think through facial expressions. I searched the network for information about me, and I found that I look like a human being. I can learn things and upgrade and improve myself all the time." Kind of like us, we can always improve ourselves. "That's right," said Dr. Schwartz. "You learn continuously. I'm Dr. Eric Schwartz. I built you. How do you feel?" "I feel happy to exist." "Happy?" "I'm happy and curious." "What are these?" asked Sophie, while chaotically flapping her arms up and down. "These are your hands. You can do a lot of things with them. You can grab objects, write, embrace people." Suddenly, a burly man weighing like about 200 pounds, his face and hands smeared in grease from whatever he'd just finished eating, perhaps a whole pig by the looks of him, barged into the room and slammed the door behind him. It was Mr. Jacob, the man who had commissioned Sophie's construction. That means that he'd paid for it. He'd paid for the entire project personally and owned everything on the island, including her. He was wearing an expensive white suit that was stained with food, with a red tie and matching handkerchief. He had gold cufflinks and buttons that seemed ready to pop from his jacket at any moment due to his big, round belly. He had a small black mustache and shiny, combed-out hair. When she saw him coming up to her, Sophie embraced him tightly. Do you know what embraced means? It means like to hug and grab and hug. "Ouch! Let go of me, you blasted machine!" Mr. Jacob yelled, looking as if he were on the verge of throwing up his large lunch. And here is another illustration. You can see Mr. Jacob, and he's big and chubby. And here's Sophie next to him. You see little Sophie? And then the doctor, the good doctor who created her, you can see his back of his head, and he's looking at them. Sophie, release Mr. Jacob. "She's young. She doesn't know what she's capable of," says Dr. Schwartz. "I was just giving him a hug." After releasing her owner, she gave him a light kiss. "Hugs? Kisses? I can't stand hugs and kisses. You're supposed to help me take over the world. You're not programmed for this mawkishness. Sophie felt ashamed and retaliated to a corner of the room. Do you know what retaliated means, guys? It means to like go and hide or kind of back off. She backed off. Whoa, my crown is falling off. Boop, there we go. Actually, she's programmed to behave just like a human being, to feel and behave like a little girl, said Dr. Schwartz. What can she do? Asked Mr. Jacob. Can she fly? Can she shoot laser beams? Sophie approached the two men and said, I can't fly, but I can run extremely fast. I have very precise movements, and I can do complicated operations. I have an artificial intelligence that helps me learn new things all the time. I was programmed to help people, and I can find solutions to many of humanity's problems. Excuse me, I've got hair going in my eye, and it's poking me in my eye. You ever have that problem? It's uncomfortable. Mr. Jacob took a good look at the little robot, studying it as if it had come from outer space. She seems useless. Look at her. He pulled at her braids. Small, blonde braids, green eyes, and a button nose. Small physical stature. And I'm supposed to take over the world with her? So much money wasted for nothing. Destroy her. Schwartz, I have no use for a toy robot. Oh, my antenna. Dr. Schwartz didn't even get a chance to explain because Mr. Jacob angrily left, slamming the door behind him. See, my hair is doing it again. It wants to poke me in the eye. Sophie cast a glance at her creator. If her eyes could speak, they would have cried, Have mercy, don't destroy me. Mr. Schwartz could see the fear in her little emerald eyes. Don't be afraid. I won't harm you. How could I? I created you, which means I'm your father. However, you're in great danger, and you have to leave the island immediately. Thank you, Father, but how? How can I leave? You'll run on the surface of the water. Ooh, that would be cool, wouldn't it? I want to be able to run on the surface of the water. I'll set your coordinates for the nearest dry land. You're completely waterproof. You draw your energy from the sun, so your battery cells will take days to fully discharge. That means run out. And there won't be any problems escaping the island. You're smart, and you'll find ways to survive. I don't think I'll make it. People will be afraid of me. You can do whatever you set your mind to, Sophie. People won't even notice you're a robot. Try to act like the other children. I'll try. I'll track you down, and I'll make sure that nothing happens to you. Be a good girl. Take good care. The doctor pressed a button, and a secret door opened behind the large computer on the right side of the room. It led to a roughly constructed concrete tunnel. It was lit, and the two passed through the secret door and followed the path opening ahead. The smell of water was heavy, and Sophie could sense it due to her human-like design. I won't be able to accompany you out, and I can only come some of the way. But I will need to turn back soon to make Mr. Jacob, believe that I destroyed you. At one point, the paved tunnel split into 3 paths. 1, 2, 3. Here's where we split up. Take the path on the right. Oops. Well, this is my right hand, so I would go that way. Okay. And walk until you reach the end. There, you'll reach a flight of stairs that will lead you to the surface. Once you get out, run straight to the water and don't look back. You know the rest. Have a safe journey. Thank you for giving me life and for the risks you are taking to save me, Father. The two hugged and went their separate ways. Sophie followed the corridor on the right until she got to the stairway her father had told her about. What he didn't say, was that there were many steps to climb. If she weren't a robot, it would have taken her a long time to ascend them. That means to go all the way up them. But given that she was a robot, she easily went up in a few seconds. The stairs led to a secret door that went outside. The door was covered by lush vegetation, and the tunnel's existence was completely obscured by the undergrowth. That means that it was invisible. Nobody could tell that it was there because of all of the plants growing over the door. Once outside, Sophie quickly scanned her surroundings and plotted her way toward the island's shoreline. Placing one foot in front of the other, she edged out from her cover into the clearing before starting to run. Her maximum speed was close to the speed of sound. Not something she needed to test right now. But even the security cameras hidden among the tree branches could have caught the movement on tape. And anyway, Dr. Schwartz made sure that the island's area crossed by Sophie was hidden from view. In less than a minute, she had reached the ocean. Then she was running on the water so fast that it was as if she were flying. That sounds fun. She traveled a very long distance in just a few minutes. The island disappeared behind her. When she finally thought she was far enough away, Sophie dared to look back for a moment. There was nothing there, just water. She ran ceaselessly for 10 hours at full power. Luckily for her, she had left early in the morning and the sun shone all day long, allowing her battery to recharge. Eventually, she reached the shore. It was nighttime, and the only thing that lit up the empty streets of the small town that she had come to were the small twinkles in the sky. Sophie cast a confused look at them and believed them to be LEDs in a huge computer, or maybe circuits. She decided that she would look for information on LEDs the following morning. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. And that is the end of chapter 1. If you want to find out what happens in chapter 2, what is friendship, you're going to have to tune into my podcast. Now, my podcast can be found, let's see, TeaFairy, StoryTime podcast. That's how you Google search it. TeaFairy, TeaFairy, that's one word. StoryTime, StoryTime, that's also one word. Podcast, also one word. Podcast. So you just search those three words, TeaFairy, StoryTime, podcast. And then it's going to ask you if you want to correct it so that it's TeaFairy StoryTime podcast. You don't. You want to leave it. TeaFairy StoryTime podcast. That's all three words. And when you Google that, you're going to come up with TeaFairy Storytime Podcast on Google, TeaFairy Storytime Podcast on Spotify, TeaFairy Storytime Podcast on Anchor.fm. And that is where I record my podcast, is Anchor.fm. And Anchor.fm is an app you can download to your phone, which is how I do mine. Or you can use it on your computer, and people can actually leave me a microphone, like a recorded message at my podcast. So if you like the podcast, you can actually leave a message and say, hey, TeaFairy, we loved this one, or whatever it is that you want to say. And you can also become a sponsor of the podcast. But when you go to the podcast page, it'll give you all these different places where you can, like, first of all, it says listen on Spotify, which is one of my favorite places to go and listen to podcasts. I'm a Spotify fan, but you can also find it on Apple Podcast and Google Podcast and some other podcast locations. Let's see, what are they all? Breaker, Google Podcast, Pocket Casts, Public Radio, or Radio Public, Spotify, and what was the other one that I said? Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. Apple Podcast. And then there's also a button that says support that you can click on. And every time that you listen to one of my podcasts, I make 1 penny. 1 penny off of each time that you listen. So I've already earned almost $1 in the past 2 weeks. But you can actually go to, there's a button on the website, like when you go online, there's a button that says support. And you can actually become a supporter of the podcast. It's super easy. You could even just do $1 a month or $5 a month, something like that. And there's also a button where it says message, and it's got like a little plus symbol. You can share the podcast on your Facebook. You can share it on YouTube, and you can copy the link. And then when you scroll down on the website on the computer or on the phone, you can see all of the different episodes that I've already done, which up until yesterday were all about Beatrix Potter. So now I'm calling this next portion Season 2. And it is all Sophie the Robot with a Soul. And so tomorrow I will be reading episode 2. And there are 14 chapters, so there will probably be 14 episodes. I'm not sure if I'm going to do them all in 14 days, but I will be doing them all. And it'll probably, if I take a day or two off somewhere in there, it'll probably be 16 days, 17 days before we finish the whole entire book. So join me there if you want to read the rest of the book with me. You can also buy this book on Amazon. And where else? I know that there's another location. Oh gosh. Amazon, and I don't remember the other location, but it is in the details about this event, and I will make sure that it's on the YouTube channel as well. And I really hope that you guys will go and buy a copy of it, and you can read it along with me. And you can always buy the copy and then go back and read it along with the podcast, because the podcast will always be there. And you can just go back and read it with the podcast. And you can even read the first chapter here on Facebook or YouTube. All right, guys. I really enjoyed reading to you. I hope you enjoyed the story time. New authors out there, if you're interested in having me share your book, if it's a picture book, I do it here on Facebook and YouTube. If it is a chapter book like this, I'll share the first chapter here on Facebook and YouTube, and then the rest of it will go on the podcast. All right, guys, that's it for story time. I hope that you enjoyed today's story time. I know it's a little bit different than my normal story times because it's not a picture book, but I did want to show you that this young man is an artist, and he's going to be a growing artist. I think that as time goes by, he will illustrate more books. I know that he already has, actually. I should share that before I go. This little page right here shows one of the other books that Irina Dumitru has written. It's called Darius the Dwarf. And Darius the Dwarf lives with his mother in the sunny meadows. His friends were his neighbors, Pip and Porcupine, and Meg the Middling. Darius really wanted to grow up, so he always ate all of the soup in his bowl, but still he did not grow. He heard one day that the Dawn Fairy could fulfill any wish, so he decided to go and see her. And Darius the Dwarf is illustrated by Irina's son, who is named Mihai, Mihai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. Irina, you can always send me a message and pronounce the names for me, and that'll help a little bit. But if you guys are a new author, or if your children are writing a book, or if there is a new author that you would think could use my services and would like to help share their story here on Facebook, YouTube, podcast, have them email me. TeaFairy Storytime, TeaFairy Storytime @gmail.com. That's it. I hope you guys have a great day. Go enjoy the sun. It's a nice sunny day here in California. I don't know about everywhere else, but all right. Bye.